As far as the digitization, where does data curation and management fit into this whole business of library collections? What should libraries be doing in that regard?
Well, I see that whole area as very much libraries' responsibility, because if you start to think about it in a university context, I mean, who else is going to do it? And consequently, you know, it's been good to see that, you know, many libraries have stepped up to that responsibility. Though, you know, people are at different stages of development, and, you know, some of the very large research libraries are, you know, in a better position to actually get going in that area. But I've seen, you know, some of the smaller libraries also being quite creative in how they have, you know, put a team together to, you know, start working in that area. We have a very interesting initiative in Pittsburgh in that respect, because Pittsburgh has been a leader in a number of different areas of digitization and scholarly communication. Very, very extensive digitized collections based on our sort of archive service center. And in addition, they're absolutely at the forefront of scholarly publishing, as of course you know, because Rush Miller was speaking at a conference, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. But they were quite slow to get engaged in this particular area, mainly because they were involved in so many other things. But Rush Miller, who is actually retiring at the end of this term, met with me last February, said that he was keen to discuss a potential partnership. He knew that the area of research data management and digital curation was something I was especially interested in. And basically he explained to me that they had already been doing quite a lot of groundwork to try and establish what the needs were within the university for support related to digital scholarship generally, but he was anticipating there would be particular needs in the area of digital humanities, because those are departments and schools which often don't already have the capacity for sort of investment in technology, new tools, and so on. Though having said that, we do have a visual media lab actually in our department, the history of art and architecture, which is actually led by a faculty member who's a joint appointment between our school and that department. So but again, that's based in a particular department, and therefore it's not a facility that is available to the whole university. So Rush and I had some discussion around that, and he was keen to move forward in a new sort of digital scholarship venture in partnership with the iSchool. And I was very enthusiastic about that because I'd been involved in what I saw as structurally a similar, very successful initiative at the University of Sheffield, where we had a Centre for Inquiry-Based Learning, which was a nationally funded centre of excellence in teaching and learning. And one of the key themes of that centre was information literacy. And through that funded initiative, a 5-year initiative, a partnership between the iSchool and the University Library was able to very successfully embed information literacy in the institution. And one of the ways we did that was that we had a number of people in the iSchool who were very interested in information literacy. We had a Centre for Information Literacy Research, which my colleague Sheila Weber had sort of founded and directed, and I was a member of that centre as well. And so we were able to lend academic credibility to the library's initiatives and trying to interest other faculty in information literacy, so that they didn't see this as the library wanting to take up their time with some silly skills initiative. They understood this was something that was academically and pedagogically important for them to engage with. And that project, we had a number of different strategies we adopted to get their interest, which basically amounted to not promoting it as an information literacy initiative per se, but having things like curriculum development grants which the faculty could apply for in order to, enhance the information literacy dimensions of their courses. And we ran workshops which were designed to help them develop their learning and teaching strategies, which they were required to do, but we were obviously making sure that information literacy was part of their learning and teaching strategies. Anyway, we thought that model of a well-regarded academic school partnering with the library to help mediate their sort of negotiations with faculty and getting them on board in these new initiatives could work well in the research data management and digital curation fields too. And so that's why I was particularly keen to work with Rush on this initiative. And one of the ways that we're making it into a real partnership is that we've got 2 joint appointments. So 2 positions which are jointly funded by the iSchool and by ULS, University Library System. And those are 2 new postdoc positions. We've managed to appoint people for 3 years in the first instance. And they're working with established staff in the library and also with faculty in the iSchool who are interested in this area. And the idea is that these folk will spend approximately 50% of their effort in the library and 50% in the school, but it'll all be part of one overall program to push forward on digital scholarship and to set a research agenda in that area, as well as to develop new courses which are related to that.
Well, we were speaking yesterday with Scott Pluchek, and he was saying that the successful data curation strategies and data management is going to require that kind of collaboration.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Campus-wide. And from different stakeholders, you're going to need to.
That's right, and obviously they're already, talking with the technology service at Pitt too, and talking with the research office. I mean, there are a lot of, we all know the various stakeholders, but I feel that this is something that gives us the edge, because of course not all institutions have an iSchool that they can partner with. So it does give us that opportunity to really take advantage of that, and we're especially lucky because last year we appointed Liz Lyon, the former Associate Director of the Digital Curation Centre, to join our faculty. And so she's introduced 2 new courses which many of the library staff at ULS and also Carnegie Mellon University libraries have been participating in, alongside some of our current students, which makes for a nice group for those types of courses.
It's clear there are a lot of challenges in the digital age for us. And do you see us as professionals, what strengths do we bring to this? And also, what failings do you see out there? What inadequacies do you see?
Well, I think that we bring a lot to the table. We must always remember that we have some distinctive areas of expertise, and I would say that the discipline of organising, this is what differentiates librarians and other information professionals from technology professionals and others who might be competing for our territory. And so I do think it's important to remember that, and that's something that I feel we in our program at Pittsburgh need to place more focus on. We obviously have a core course in organising and retrieving information, but I think metadata, maybe we have elective courses on metadata, but we maybe need to think about how much of that should come into the core, because I feel that that's the sort of thing we're looking at now. And in fact, only last week we had a meeting to discuss the digital components of our curriculum across the whole program, and to think about, what does any person going through our program need in that area, and then what is the, what would be the components that you want to offer to somebody who wants to specialize in that area? Because I think we need to, recognize there are going to be generalists and specialists with regard to some of these sort of digital developments. But everybody, the baseline is definitely has expanded there. And everybody needs to know more now than they did previously.
Do you have specific skill sets that you have in mind when you say this? And how are iSchools like yours addressing, making sure that librarians develop these skill sets?
Yeah, well, I mean, building on that, having said that, there are some things that are distinctive to our profession, there are other, I think, abilities that libraries bring to the table which make them the right people to lead on areas like digital curation. And that includes things like their existing practices in liaison librarian work, because one of the things that's very important in this area, and indeed in many other developments in academic libraries right now, is that many of the types of support and intervention that libraries are sort of making to actually provide the sort of professional assistance that's needed, they have to be embedded into workflows rather than sort of standalone services that you come and ask for. So, I mean, information literacy is obviously the classic example. It's well known. But if you look now at the types of support that people are providing for academic research, and it's looking at what are the things that are needed at the different stages of the research life cycle. So the liaison librarian model, which enables librarians to develop sort of relationships with faculty and other researchers in different disciplines to understand the particular needs of those disciplines, which may be different and increasingly are.
Yes.
I mean, we've already talked about the difference in humanities and sciences in that respect. And design services that are going to sort of meet the needs, understanding the difference between the history professor and somebody in biological sciences, for example. So I think that existing model, so that's a sort of structural asset that libraries already have and need to build on. I think there are other things like many of our existing knowledge and skills. We have a base level that can be adapted and refined for these new areas. So copyright is another obvious one. That's something that, librarians have a good grasp of the sort of principles of how intellectual property rights operate. And obviously the issues vary for different types of material, and data is taking us into a new arena there, but they have that sort of initial understanding of the field, which I think is very valuable. And then of course the whole area of collection development. I mean, all the issues that need to be considered as to whether you want to add data sets to the collection. There's the whole cycle of consideration that we go through with any types of material. Although a lot of it is automated now and routine for sort of commodified purchases, but for new materials like this, it's much more like the type of considerations that we need to look at when we're talking about special collections. And indeed some people have referred to science data sets as being the sort of special collections of the digital age. But I was interested recently to be just reviewing some materials on digital preservation as I sort of prepared for my class. I was doing a session on special collections for my academic libraries course, and the argument being advanced there by Ross Harvey was that librarians needed to be moving more towards the practices of archivists in terms of some of their models of archival appraisal. He was arguing that's a sort of more rigorous approach than some of the approaches that librarians have taken to selection in the past, and that selecting for digital preservation, which is basically what we're talking about here when we're selecting data sets that need to be curated, needed to adopt those sorts of criteria. And so what I see is interesting there is we're seeing another example of sort of convergence of professions within the information domain in terms of librarians and archivists, just the way we've also seen librarians converging with technologists. And so I think altogether that sort of makes us see, the breadth of knowledge and skills that the modern information professional needs to have. And you need to have this broad understanding, but at the same time work is becoming more specialized. And so it's this T-shaped model, being broad and deep at the same time.
I know one of my professional observations about library school education, and of course this is my own background coming out of business management, is that many programs don't have a focus or don't focus on organizational development and providing understanding of organizations, how they function, how cultures, and a lot of librarians struggle. They have the technical skills.
Yes.
But they don't have the organizational savvy
Yes.
to make those skills and to bring those skills to reality in many cases. And so they struggle for years inside organizations that are locked into a certain model, and it's tough. I have always wondered.
Yes, I think you're right there. I mean, we are fortunate. We have a really excellent course on managing and leading library and information services, part of our core curriculum at Pitt. But I think that we should consider whether we need to extend that. In fact, we have already started talking about offering another course on organizational behavior, which enables the students to get more of this broader context, because context is everything these days, and developing some models and frameworks for how they can actually assess organizations and sort of diagnose them and understand what are the things that determine whether that might be the sort of organization where they might want to work.
Exactly.
And that's another interesting comparison with the UK, because in Sheffield, the students, of course, have far less choice, when they go through the program, because not only do they typically take 8 courses rather than 12, because a third of the course is taken, the program is taken up with a research project, but the core is relatively bigger, because they have 5. In the MA librarianship, there's basically 6 core courses. Although one of those is take one of 3 relating to a particular sector, so academic, public, and sort of children and youth. Well, I should say academic and special, because that's what it covers. But of those other 5, then one of those would be the management course. But in fact, there's 2 management courses in Sheffield that are part of the core. And originally, we had an introduction to management and a human resource management as a separate course. But then what we did was we combined them together and made them a sort of a 2-course sequence. It's spread over twice as many credits, spread over 2 terms that way. Yeah. And that does enable them to get that mix of both the sort of technical side, the finance, the sort of project management, and the people-oriented things like culture and leadership and other aspects of people management. Yeah.
As we talk about the broadening of skill sets and what we need, should librarians be looking outside the traditional library education to get some of these skill sets that they need to tackle the future?
Well, I mean, I'm a great believer in continuous learning, because I think that's the way we enhance our practice, by sort of learning and thinking all the time. And I think perspectives from outside the library field can be extremely valuable, because that's what we have to deal with in our day-to-day work. I mean, I myself did do, I did an MBA actually, as when I first became a library director. It was around about that time that I did an MBA, and then after that, I did a master's in information systems, which was, in a management school again. So it was not in an information school. So again, that was giving me different organizational perspectives on technology and information. And I also did a certificate in learning and teaching when I became a faculty member, because I felt that was important, because I'd had plenty of experience of doing presentations, but I had actually done a lot of guest lectures while I was a library director, but I had not really been sort of properly trained to be a teacher. And it actually is a requirement in the UK now that, as a result of a major report in the 1990s on higher education and the learning age, that the equivalent of all tenure track faculty have to take a course in learning and teaching as part of that initial period. It would be the equivalent in order to get tenure. I mean, it works slightly differently in the UK. Basically, people are appointed on a 3-year probation rather than a 6-year tenure track. Right. But that is normally a requirement that they take that course. And I mean, I wasn't required to do it because I went in as a full professor, and it wasn't a requirement. But I decided that I was going to do it. I mean, also, I thought as a head of school, I felt it was important to sort of set that sort of as a role model, and they stress its importance. And I was the only head of school who ever did that.
Actually, we were going to talk a little bit about, in fact, you kind of answered this question in your discussion of the archival, but what about the role of archives and preservation in all of this? You talked that librarians maybe should be looking at archival processes and the way archivists operate.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. Well, I think that has actually been a theme in a lot of the discussions around digital curation right from the very beginning. Have been people who are more from the sort of archival end of things have been contributing to those discussions, and that's apparent if you go to something like the International Conference on Digital Curation, where you see people from a range of different backgrounds there. We're lucky at Pittsburgh because we do have a strong archival program, but it is, it's in a track, and there are some electives which students who are not in the archives track can take, but and they can in many cases they would be accepted to taking some of their core courses as well, but logistically they can't. That's the problem, because there just isn't enough time, and they tend to be scheduled at times when they've got other things that they want to take. So that is one of the things that I'm wanting to look at as we reshape our curriculum moving forward, which we're just embarking on yet another sort of fundamental review of the curriculum, and thinking about how it ought to be moving in the future, because I do think that we need to see how we can draw on practices from the different areas of the information professions to bring to bear on the sort of problems that we're actually tackling these days. I mean, we are very lucky in Pittsburgh because we have a very large archival services centre as part of the university library system, and we have people who work there who are contributing to our programme, and we have one particular member of the ULS teaches a course on library and archival preservation for us, which is a nice one because it actually has that sort of spectrum.
Sure.
And she also teaches another one on photographic archives as well. And these are courses that appeal to both archive students and library students. And and it's nice for them to take these courses together, I think, and because I feel that there's more that unites the different parts of the information profession than separates them, and I think we need to guard against people becoming too siloed.
I agree.
Yeah. What about the more traditional things that I took when I was in library school? Things like cataloging and collection development.
Yeah.
Are those still being taught as seriously as they were then?
Yes. Collection development is a course that we have just reactivated actually this year. It's not that we weren't teaching it before, but it tended to be embedded in particular courses rather than being a course on its own. But for the first time this year, we've had somebody come in and teach a collection development course, which is intended to focus specifically on that as a discipline, and be presented in a way that it's suitable for people in all types of libraries,
Sure.
Public and academic particularly. So we certainly do feel that is really important. I mean, obviously, the sorts of practices that we're seeing emerge now in collection development are very different from the things that have come in now, like these demand-driven models, for example, and also, the fact that we're thinking much more about different approaches to collection development for different parts of the collection, whether it's the sort of general collection or the special collection or the distinctive collections that our colleagues at Yale, used that label a few years ago when they came here. So I think that's interesting. But, there's a lot of interesting activity going on in the collection field. I mean, a lot of the work that OCLC are doing, for example, which I think, students need to be exposed to, need to sort of think about conceptually as well as at a practical level. So I think that's really important. Cataloguing, I'm going to perhaps annoy some people by saying that I don't think we should have a course in cataloguing. I mean, there's just not room to do everything in the curriculum. Now, we do cover cataloguing in the organising and retrieving course. Sure. So I'm not saying we're ignoring cataloguing. I just don't think we need a whole course devoted to cataloguing. We cover it in organising and retrieving, and the instructor who teaches that has students actually, do catalogue records, to demonstrate they've understood the principles that are presented in the course. So I think that is enough, because I think if they go into a job which requires them to do cataloguing, there will be procedures, in that particular institution which they need to be introduced to. And as long as they have the principles and the concepts firmly in mind, I think that's sufficient. I don't think it's a good use of their time in the program to spend, too much time developing hands-on skills, because, for practices that are evolving all the time anyway and are likely to be different in different institutions. So I think we just need to give them that foundation. And I think that applies across the board. I mean, clearly with technology, there are a lot of new tools coming on stream all the time. Now, it's really important that students are confident with technology and confident that they can learn new tools. But which particular tools is not the issue, but we need to give them enough experience of doing this, doing that, learning a whole lot of different tools to show that they can. And also they need to, I think probably these days, have a better foundation in understanding what's underneath all those. And that's the way we're reshaping and rethinking our technology component now.
Many institutions are actually giving up the idea of an individual institutional catalog to a shared catalog experience. That changes the whole paradigm.
I know. I know.
Much to the chagrin of a lot of cataloging people.
Well, I know. Certainly in the UK, there are, all the libraries that I directed. The amount of cataloguing actually done in situ was minimal, because it was basically all records taken from the utilities. Now, clearly, it's different if you've large foreign language collections, and special collections is another area completely.
Exactly.
But one of the issues we have is that we do have students who go out into, say, small public libraries or small libraries of different sorts, where they do, hands-on cataloguing. But I feel that we give them enough, for that, and then I think they can pick up the rest on the job.
Yeah, and one of the keys for library educators, what I hear you saying is to really prepare students to have confidence to tackle problems and have confidence that they can find those solutions.
Yeah,
and
absolutely, absolutely.
Wasn't one of the speakers that was talking about the needs that came up with, that's the kind of person we actually need now, is the person who can come in and say, I can figure this problem out.
Yeah.
That has that confidence and underlying skill sets to have that confidence to just go ahead and tackle challenges as they come along.
Yeah, and we certainly feel that having experience in the field is really important.
Absolutely.
Because employers expect that, and we do encourage our students to take a sort of full credit field experience as part of the program, and we also give them as many opportunities as we can to interact with practitioners, and we have them come into our courses. Some of them are teaching, and as well. But I think that the more they have the opportunity to see how these principles and concepts are applied in the field, the more confident they become.
Right. I think you have a kind of a trick question, don't you?
Oh dear.
I just want to say, Sheila, this has been a marvelous experience. I've certainly enjoyed it. If you were sitting where we are, is there some question that you would ask yourself and that we have missed, perhaps, or something, a point you wanted to make?
Well, that is a trick question. I'm finding it pretty hard to come up with something. I think we've had a pretty good discussion, and I suppose the only other thing I would say, which we sort of mentioned in passing, but perhaps I would like to maybe elaborate on a little bit, is when we started talking about librarians moving into some of these new areas like research, data management, digital curation, and the need, to collaborate. I think that that's a bigger issue than simply, collaborating with other services and, seeing it as a collaboration with faculty. I've been impressed by some of the case studies I've read of librarians getting engaged in the digital humanities area, which is an area that seems to particularly invite these sorts of comments about what collaboration means. And they're talking about people moving away from a service as support model to one that's much more about, real partnership. So it's not about a librarian, being able to show a digital humanist how to use a particular tool. It's about a librarian potentially joining that project and actually using that tool and contributing to the project. So becoming a part of the project team in a real sense, rather than just a sort of supporting player there. And I think that bibliometrics is another example where a skill that, should have been in our sort of toolkit years ago, but perhaps has not been, used a lot, is really coming into its own again as people are getting very interested in institutional assessment at different levels. And there's opportunities for librarians to contribute by actually doing things of that type.
Well, I would like to join Jack and say how delighted I am that you were able to come and make time in your schedule. I've really enjoyed it. I have too. Really learned a lot. It's been fun. We've gone through a good bit.
Good. Well, it's been a pleasure for me too.
Sheila, thank you very, very much.
Thank you for inviting me.